AC, we are traveling way, way, way beyond Hammerland into the realm of the Frightmare from 1974. Not the one from 1981 or 83 or whatever. This is a hardcore British countryside, I guess, thriller. And I got to admit, for the first half of the movie, I wondered, why the hell are we watching this and talking about it? I did not like Frightmare. And then something happened in the middle of it. And I can't even say there was an inciting incident, just something changed in my brain. And it became a movie that I'm going to own and revisit and cherish. This film is incredible. But before we get to that, why are we talking about Frightmare in Beyond Hammerland?
Why are we talking about Frightmare Beyond Hammerland? This is 1974, so Hammer is pretty much on its last legs at this point. We've had Dracula AD 1972, and we've had the Satanic Rites of Dracula in 73. And the studio's pretty much running on fumes at this point. And Pete Walker, who is the writer, well, he wrote the story for this one. He's the producer, director, but he had created a couple of other films prior to this. Die Screaming Marianne, The Flesh and Blood Show, and just prior to this in 1974 was The House of Whipcord, which also features our star Sheila Keith, who plays Dorothy. And Pete Walker had started off doing, kind of like comedies, but also like, softcore sex films. And then he moved into what he called terror pictures, which he was explicit that they were terror pictures as opposed to horror pictures, because he saw what Hammer was doing is kind of the horror, the kind of fantasy, supernatural. And he was, as you can see by watching Frightmare, he was much more about kind of the here and the now and the down and the dirty. His films are very much about kind of urban horror, even though you get some of it takes place off in the cottage, off in the countryside. But it was very much about Britain, or specifically England, in the 1970s. And his films, several of which I just listed, but also House of Mortal Sin and The Comeback, and they're all kind of a type where you watch it and you go, that was mean and nasty, and oh, it's Pete Walker. Okay, I get it.
So have you seen all these other films that you're?
I have. I'm a big fan. If you couldn't tell, I'm a big fan of Pete Walker. Him and Norman J. Warren, who's another British director, around the same time, although not nearly as successful or as his films aren't as well realized. But Norman J. Warren and Pete Walker were both kind of like the British bad boys of the 70s. And it's ironic that Pete Walker's career, like his last film was in 1980, 81, 82, somewhere around there. The House of Long Shadows, which reunited horror stars Peter Cushing, Christopher Lee, Vincent Price, and threw in John Carradine as well. So it was, and that one's kind of like an old dark house, comedy with, some horror icons.
We're going to talk about that next year, right?
I sure hope so.
That sounds amazing.
Yep.
But here's the thing: this movie has a great poster, and a great title.
Yes, it does.
And it's weird because I just kind of glanced at the poster when I first, went to load up the movie on YouTube, and I thought it was, I don't know, it looked like an Ozzy Osbourne kind of a character, almost like this is going to be like a punk rock murder, like fiesta or something. But no, it's a little old lady. Well, not so little, but Dorothy, as you mentioned, is a psychopath who, along with her husband in the very beginning of the film, are committed to a mental institution for a series of horrible murders. Now, 15 years later, they're two daughters, one who was, I guess, their daughter, and then the other was the daughter of the husband from a previous marriage. Right. These two daughters are now living together. One is 15, that's Debbie, and the other is Jackie, who's slightly older, I don't know, probably early 20s. And Debbie is constantly running around town with the bad crowd, getting into all sorts of trouble, hanging out in bars. And the parents have been recently released from the institution, and Jackie knows about it and is kind of going to see them out in this remote cottage, on the down low. But there's a question of, is mom back at it again? Because it's kind of established throughout the film that it wasn't so much that the dad was, participating in these murders, but he was definitely aiding and abetting and covering up. It was mom that had, like, Dorothy, who had the real problem with the drill. um,
Yeah.
and also, it looks like maybe young Debbie has a propensity for violence, possibly inherited from her mom. Uh, all of this comes about, I think, really in the second half of the picture. I Knowing now where it ends up, I have an appreciation for the build, but it is a long build. We start off in like the was it I don't know, 1957, I think.
Yep. Yep.
It's a black and white sequence at a carnival. A guy goes in to, I guess, have his tarot cards read, and he ends up, dead against a wall. Then we cut to a trial, and then we cut to modern day London, and it's these two girls living together, and one of them starts going out with a psychiatrist, and then there's this old couple in the cottage, and she's kind of batty, and he's kind of doting, but concerned. I'm like, where is this all going? And then I went back and I looked at the poster just to make sure, did I put on the right movie here? Where's the drill? Where's the psychotic rock star?
Right.
But in that second half, when things really start to unravel for all these characters, this movie comes alive and is very cerebral and scary, terrifying, I would say, to use your description earlier, than many movies that I've seen in this genre, or frankly, any horror genre.
Yeah, I keep coming back to this one. Frightmare is probably my favorite of Pete Walker's efforts. House of Mortal Sin is pretty great, and House of Whipcord is also really solid. So like those three are really where I point people when I'm saying, hey, you should get some Pete Walker in your life. As you say, yes, there is a pretty decent wind up to it. I think, getting to know Jackie and the conflict between her and her sister, Debbie. Debbie, our young 15-year-old, we can tell is just, she's a troublemaker. She's, like you said, she's running with like a biker crowd, and she gets a barman beaten up for his troubles. And then we find out that, even worse occurred to him at her hand or foot. We're not sure what transpired. But I think there's that weird, that terror of youth that was certainly aware and alive in the 60s and 70s, where, the kids were just running wild and you couldn't control them. And they used their youth as a kind of badge against harm, because they kind of can just, well, who would do such a thing? No, certainly no child would do this.
Right, and this is a couple years after, or 3 years after A Clockwork Orange. There was the novel, but then the Kubrick film, obviously, which was X-rated at the time and caused all sorts of consternation, because that was, even though the actors were in their 20s, they were playing, according to the novel, 15, 16 years old, if that. So what we have in Debbie is, she's a beautiful, young teenage girl who you'd think, oh, she's, she has an ugliness inside of her that is not evident at all on the outside.
Right.
And that level of, just nastiness and ultimate depravity, we keep seeing revealed more and more as the film goes along, up until the stunning conclusion. And just to make sure I don't give anything too much away, I'm going to put on the old spoiler banner there, so you've been warned. But yeah, there's sorry, go ahead.
No, well, I was just going to say, but she's also very skilled at covering it up and putting on that 15-year-old guise, like when she's talking to the police, like, or when she's talking to Graham, the psychiatrist that starts courting Jackie. She knows how to put on the guise of an innocent 15-year-old.
And also, there's a parallel performance in that regard, or aspect of that performance, in Dorothy.
Correct.
The dad and Debbie will be kind of dressing her down, and she's like, "Oh, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm so confused." And then they'll cut to kind of like a wry little smile that you're not sure if either one of them caught, but we certainly did.
Right.
And then she'll turn on the just the viciousness when she starts taking on customers, tarot like tarot card readings,
Yeah.
and it's very much like Julia and then the first Hellraiser movie, kind of going out to bars and picking up people just to feed Frank. Except in this case, Dorothy kind of has people come to the cottage when no one else is around, do their readings, and then she bludgeons them to death, stuffs them in under hay bales in the barn, and then goes out later to eventually chop them up with a drill. And then also later we find out she's eating them. I mean, I'm not kidding. This movie is just like this crazy spiral of depravity that
Yeah.
just gets like narrower and narrower as it goes on, or gets wider and wider. And I hate to use the word shocking because it seems so played out, but I was genuinely shocked by where this movie went.
Yeah, you don't exactly. You don't think it's going to go there, and I certainly don't think, you think it's going to go there in in the 70s, in the wake of all the, the Hammer films. We have a certain idea as to what British horror is at this point, and this is very much something different. Tony Tenzer is our executive producer. We actually haven't mentioned him yet, even though we've seen several of his films already for this series. He was the executive producer behind Repulsion. He exec produced Blood on Satan's Claw. He's also responsible for Witchfinder General, which we'll be watching next month. So he's very much kind of a key player in the British horror scene from the late 60s forward.
And I think that this was make the perfect trilogy. Now, I haven't seen Witchfinder General, as you mentioned, but Frightmare, Blood on Satan's Claw, and Repulsion. I was thinking about all three of these movies. Of course, I was thinking about Frightmare while I was watching it, but you have that with Blood on Satan's Claw. You've got the kind of angelic blonde, comely young lass of the countryside who is, carrying around the devil, almost literally.
Yep.
And then in Repulsion, you've got the two sisters living together, and they're trying to figure out how to deal with an emerging psychosis and how that manifests specifically in relation to the men in their lives.
Yeah.
And I'm also thinking about a recent conversation on Psycho 2 that we did on your channel a couple weeks ago. I came away feeling like this is what I wanted Psycho 2 to feel like.
Okay.
That genuine familial connection, but also feel like I was dealing with real psychology. We have a shrink in the movie who's kind of analyzing things. We even have the famous Psycho-esque scene of the detective? No, he wasn't a detective. He was like the head of the institute, sitting down to talk to the shrink, saying, "Here's what exactly is happening with this main character, in case those in the back seats haven't figured it out yet." But it was still a fun scene.
Yeah. I mean, I think the performances are all just really terrific. The wonderfully named Kim Butcher plays Debbie, and Deborah Fairfax plays Jackie. And our two headliners are Rupert Davies. This was his last film, but we had seen him. He's also in Witchfinder General. He's in Dracula Has Risen from the Grave. Let's see, he's in Oblong Box. He's in Crimson Cult. Like he'd certainly kind of generated a few genre credits toward the end of his career. But I think the shining star is Sheila Keith, who plays Dorothy. She had a smaller role in House of Whipcord the same year, and Pete Walker just kind of found a muse in her, and she appears in several of his other films, including House of Long Shadows with all the other horror icons. And by that point, I'm like, yes, she belongs in that company. She's just that good.
And it's been a while since I've been able to play the Friday the 13th card, but I've got two references in this movie. One is the much better done here than it would be 9 years later in Friday the 13th Part 3, flaming hot poker in the chest or the stomach scene.
Yeah.
Not only that, but it's not only just like a red hot poker, it's actually flaming,
on
like
fire
sword. Yes. This being wielded by this, by Dorothy into the gut of one of her tarot customers. And it's such that moment of backing up. It is kind of funny because she says, "You've locked the door." I'm like, yeah. But being backed up with nowhere to go, and this instrument of death coming towards you, which kind of calls to mind also the opening of the first Friday the 13th, which we see more of in the last scene,
Yeah.
where, spoiler alert again, Jackie is backed up against a wall with someone approaching her with, a huge implement of her impending doom and literally no escape. That's a hell of a way to end the movie because being the modern moviegoer that I am, I was like, okay, this is where the dad is going to realize that his, natural by blood young daughter is in true peril. He's got to put a stop to his second wife and their offspring because they're evil and he's seen the light. But no, he stands by and lets it happen even as she's screaming, "Daddy, daddy." I mean,
Yep.
wow.
Yeah, David McGillivray is responsible for the screenplay, and watching it recently, the idea, I mean, like all of it kind of works in a way that the dad feels justified. He says the line, we both feel closer to Debbie. And that's because, Jackie, with the best of intentions, has, has revealed things to her psychiatrist, Bo, has gone so far as to allow him to go to the cottage. And it makes it look really bad for her. It makes it look like she has been going around behind their back because she has. And, in the meantime, our Edmund, who played the dad, he's so in love with his wife. He would never do anything to harm her. And now he has a child who is willing to not only be part of that, but also willing to take it on for him. Like he doesn't have to do the covering up. If Sheila Keith's character has a compatriot, then he can kind of step back a little further. And I think there is a sense of he will not, or she rather, Debbie will not only be her partner in crime, but a successor. Like his successor. She'll be the one to cover up for mom in the future. And that's something Jackie was never ready or willing to do.
I wonder if George Lucas watched this movie as he was creating Star Wars and the concept of the Sith. There's always one master, one apprentice. Probably not. But although he did film Star Wars in England, so who knows?
I was going to say it was a few years earlier, so he might have had a few moments to just go wandering around, watch a few flicks in London.
But that just that idea of Jackie, of Debbie, not only having sharing her mother's kind of psychosis, but well, let me ask you this: do you think that there was some kind of an additional aspect of actual psychic ability in Dorothy? Because she's a tarot card reader, and I couldn't quite remember all the information that had been passed around because there's a lot of dialogue in this movie between a lot of
Sure.
different groups at different motives and perspectives. But when uh, the shrink comes to visit, why am I blanking on his name?
Graham.
Graham, yes, because he had used a fake name. But Graham goes to visit. He gets his cards read, or he starts to, and Dorothy plays along for a bit. But she very clearly feels like she's getting messages and then
Yeah.
relaying those to him and saying, like, "You're not who you think you are." He's like, "You're in the medical profession." He's like, "No, I went to medical school once, but I'm not a doctor." But
Right.
it didn't seem like she was playing with him. It seemed like she
She
was
was
getting
actually,
messages from the universe and then figuring out in her head, like, "Oh, you're here to kill me,"
yeah,
or
I
to
actually wrote that down in my notes. I was like, wait, she's actually like, she can tell the future, because when she's working with her other customers, it seems like she's kind of fishing, going, do you have any family, any friends, any romantic, to see if anybody will notice if they
right.
go missing. But that doesn't seem to be the case when she's dealing with Graham. It feels like she's actually picking up signals and like, oh, you're in the medical profession, and what is your? And it's like, oh, that feels authentic. It feels like you actually know a few things, and maybe that's correct. Maybe she was an actual spiritualist when she was running around in 1957 at the sideshow, and it also worked as a means for her to procure her victims. I do have a quick question for Dr. McGillivray, who wrote the script, is how did she get the ad into the paper? Like, I'm just kind of like, well, how did that transpire? She would have either had to mail something in, actually
Oh,
go
for
there in person
the psychic advert?
to
Yeah.
place the advert. I mean, that was the one thing I was like, huh, I wonder how that came to pass, and why Edmund never questions it. Like, oh, you have people coming out to see you. I see. Like, how did that happen?
Well, it was established later on, at least I thought, I could be wrong
Oh,
here,
that's true that
that
Debbie's been
Debbie
around.
has been helping because
Yes.
there are these other weird allusions to like the fire poker murder. There is like someone sees something off screen or hears
Right, right,
something
right,
off screen as if like, oh, there's someone else in the room. You're thinking, oh, that's probably Edmund, but then Edmund is coming home,
right.
and right in the middle of this, so that might have been Debbie, and
No,
she
no,
might have been
that makes
running the
sense.
ads. Yeah.
Yep, that solves that. The other question I had was, like, where's a 15-year-old getting a storage locker? But then it turns out that seems like that's Jackie's perhaps as well. They're never 100% specific about that. Like, they just go to where it is, where the body is stored, the body of the barman.
Right. Because they found that in the trunk, right? In the car park?
Right. Which also I'm kind of like, how did Debbie get the body into a trunk and then into the storage unit? Like, all of that kind of happens rather conveniently. But again, who's going to split
Well
hairs when it's this entertaining?
well, I think it had been a couple of days at that point. So, I mean, I don't know, maybe she was able to drive. She could have figured that
Well, but
out.
she spirits the body of the barman away pretty quickly because the police come after the witness. The witness sees the thugs beating on the guy, and so how that happened, I don't know.
Well, what I'm thinking is she sticks around with the still alive, injured body of the barman while her compatriots get on their bikes and like, we gotta scram, the
Right,
cops are coming.
right.
And then she comes out and she's all bloody and everything. I think she got the body out of the way somehow,
Hmm.
moved it, probably just out of the general area where the cops would have been looking, and then maybe went back the next day with a car, put the
Yeah.
body in the trunk, and took it to the storage unit. My biggest thing, and they fix it at the very end when Debbie's boyfriend goes snooping around that the barn and the cottage or whatever.
Right.
But there's so many people in this movie who encounter bodies that have been sitting for days, and there's never like the revulsion of like, oh, that really smells.
Right. Right.
They're
Right.
like looking around like, oh, there's three bodies underneath all this hay. I noticed because I saw blood. Like, no, you'd know.
Well, I mean, that straw that just keeps it keeps all the smell in. I don't know if you know this. It's a very common trait of straw. Right.
And that, kids, is called science. Um, no, but I got such a kick out of this movie, not only because of what it was and how it unfolded, but I finished watching it this morning. I've been thinking about it all day. Some of these kind of questions that you're bringing up, but also what am I going to understand better when I go back and rewatch it? And I was kind of, I guess this shows how bad things have gotten in the almost 50 years since this has come out. But in the beginning, when Edmund and Dorothy are on trial, and the
Right.
judge is like throwing the book at him, almost literally saying, "You've committed so many of these heinous murders," and it turns out they killed 6 people, or she did.
Right.
I'm like, 6 people,
Only six. Come on, amateur hour. Yeah.
right? But no. So I guess what? How did this movie do? Because if this is sort of like Hammer as a genre kind of at the end of its line, this is like an injection of a sort of Hammer style, an evolution of the formula, for
Right.
whatever you want to call it. Did it work?
I mean, it did. It did. It made quite a splash, and it's, I think, Pete Walker's most successful film to date. It's certainly his best known. Um, but yeah, I think it did exactly what it was meant to do, and there's some fun kind of commentary about the societal decay, like, and Walker has gone on record saying, I wasn't trying to ever make a comment, I was just being a cheeky lad, trying to scare a few people, but like this whole idea of the family as kind of this decaying unit, and where they turn against each other and they cover up for each other, And like there's it's not a great representation of like what relationships, what healthy relationships look like. But you also get the sadness of Dorothy when she says, they took my baby away from me. I mean, she must have been pregnant when they took her into the hospital, because they almost immediately take Debbie away and put her in an orphanage or a convent, depending on who's telling the story at the moment.
And I feel like if Debbie has that bad seed kind of gene from mom, I feel like someone could make a Frightmare prequel of what she was up to at that at that convent.
For sure.
It is interesting. I think maybe it was during the psychiatrist backstory exposition dump where we find out about Dorothy's history and kind of explaining, her cannibalism. She was a child of the Great Depression, and she had pet rabbit or rabbits, and her family had to eat them because they were so poor. I'm like, that's twisted, and it doesn't excuse anything that she did.
Right.
But it's one of those origin stories where you're like, wow, that's born out of genuine tragedy. Not like, oh, my little boy drowned in a lake, or I got set on fire because I was molesting kids, aka Freddy Krueger. Just wanted to throw that out there. I'm not talking about anybody I know. But there's so much in this movie that I'm surprised hasn't been replicated or used as like the elderly killer in more movies, right?
Yeah, I mean, and I think that's the other thing is like Sheila Keith is a force of nature. Like she gives such a great performance, from the little, the pity, poor me, I'm all alone here, to like when she's doing the tarot readings, you just see kind of the sinister quality sneaking in. And by the end, like she's just a raving lunatic with, her eyes bugged out and her hair looking very much like it is on the poster. It's a wonderful performance, but I think also it shows us something we haven't seen in this kind of British horror, at least not to this extent. There had been other kind of like gory type films, but like the idea of somebody who drills into their victims' skulls in order to get their brains is kind of like, ugh. And the idea that Jackie was playing along and like bringing packages, I'm kind of like, that seems like an elaborate scheme for her to bring these packages out. It's like, well, Dad can't go and get meat from the butcher and say that it's, whatever, human. I mean, it's a curious plot device. I don't mind it because it adds to the mystery. But yeah, the fact that she's like, getting brains from the butcher and bringing them out to her mom.
Well, also that is another kind of Psycho 2 connection, because Norman Bates, as that movie opens up, he's been released because he is completely cured, according to Robert Loggia. And in this film, we're meant to believe that the elderly couple had completely fooled the people at the institution in order to get out. But then that the Edmund and Jackie were going to the length of getting these brains, sending them to the mom, saying, "Oh, these are human brains. So you can, as long as you don't start killing people again, we'll
give you all the brains you need."
Right. But that is the exact, that's the evidence that they should have gone right back to the institution and say, hey, mom still wants brains, everybody. I was thinking about like Norman Bates and his doctor saying, yeah, you just got out of an institution for murdering a number of people and your mother. I'm going to put you right back in the house where it all happened.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, it is, it's troubling that, that Edmund chooses Dorothy over the good of society, chooses her over his own daughter. I mean, we never find out what happened to his previous wife, Jackie's mom. We don't know what's going on there, but like Debbie is the union of Edmund and Dorothy. And in some ways it's kind of like, this is the family, like Jackie has become an outsider.
Did I missed this part of the backstory, but do we know if Jackie went to live with the mother, or is just like she was out of the picture somehow after Edmund and her natural mother split up? Is that
Well,
ever
no,
established?
I get the sense that Jackie, like after Edmund married Dorothy, that Jackie was, living with them until they got put away. I don't know what happened to Jackie when they got put away. Like, it doesn't seem like she was old enough to be out on her own.
Again, with this backstory idea, I want a prequel involving Debbie at the nunnery, and I
Yep.
also want a prequel showing, I think what happened to Jackie's mom was Dorothy.
Yeah, sure. Right. Right. Dorothy decided she needed somebody who would cover up for her, and Edmund was just the guy.
Yeah, man. There was something else I wanted to mention. As much as I love the filmmaking of this movie, and as much as I appreciated, as I mentioned, the attractiveness of our Debbie, our psycho Debbie character, there was an uncomfortable, very awkward zoom. Did you catch this? It's the scene where I think it was Jackie discovered the blood on Debbie's jeans jacket,
Hmm.
and Debbie walks into the room. Jackie's kind of in the foreground with the jacket. And as Debbie walks in, the camera zooms onto Debbie's chest and then quickly goes up. Like it's almost literally an eyes up here, guys, zoom.
I didn't notice that, but I will ever forward.
Yeah, I went back and I rewound it because I'm like, was I looking away and I imagined something? But no, it actually happened.
Well, what you're talking about earlier with the idea of like the parallel lives of Dorothy and Debbie, I mean, both of these characters have secret lives. Debbie is running around at night. Jackie has no idea where she is, what she's up to. Same thing with Dorothy. Like she's doing all sorts of things that Edmund is unaware of. It's an interesting kind of, again, it's a smart little screenplay.
It really is. And I also like that the relationship between Graham. I had to look his name up again because I keep forgetting. I keep calling him the shrink. But the relationship between Graham and Jackie is great because I think that's another thing that starts out sort of Hellraiser-ish with this dinner party with these two people kind of meeting each other very awkwardly over, just banter, and there's kind of some sexual tension there. But they start getting together, they're interested in each other. But as Graham comes to find out what Jackie has been doing or in how she's involved with her parents, he becomes very concerned. He's like, that's not what you do in that situation.
Right. Well,
Stop that.
he also completely oversteps his boundaries in all regards. I was like, wait, you don't just go to somebody's sister's house and start like psychoanalyzing them and then telling the sister what she needs. And it's like, I'm just like, wow, you are way across the line, my friend.
Oh yeah, he should have had his license taken away immediately.
Yeah.
And I think at the end when he goes out to the cottage to try and get some, intel, he's way underestimating
Yeah.
because at this point, did he know? Again, I watched the movie for the first time this morning, so I can't remember all of the details. But did he know the history of the parents, or did he
Yes.
suspect? Or okay,
Yeah.
why?
He doesn't know. Huh? Why what?
Okay, no, finish your thought.
Well, I don't think he or Jackie know that there are murders occurring yet. Um, but he does know that this big elaborate ruse has been going on.
Right. My question is, why, if you suspect that there is something strange going on with a couple who had served 15 years in a mental institution for killing 6 people,
Right.
would you ever go out to their house, let alone at night, alone,
Well, but I
and try and
think
get the better of them?
no, sure, sure. It's ill-advised for sure. But I don't think he recognizes, nor does Jackie, that she has begun to slip. He's Jackie would very much like to, move forward. She senses this is interesting also, is that earlier in the movie, Edmund actually kind of turns on Jackie. She stands up to her mom and says, you can't be doing this anymore. And you said you were done. And is this what you're trying to do? And Edmund like goes, stop it, Jackie, stop it. And it's like, it's clear that like it's Dorothy and Edmund against Jackie, and that the alliances are not Jackie and her father against, the psychopathic murderer.
And that's a nice also bit of foreshadowing, leading up
Right.
to the very end, because yeah, again, I was just so hopeful that Jackie would be saved at the 0 hour, but then it just ends with this close up that goes into like the negative print
Oh
of
man.
Edmund's
Yeah.
face. It's so like
It's
it's a getter. I don't know. I'm gonna have to think about this in my pantheon of classic horror movie endings.
Well, what's interesting is that this is the same year as Texas Chainsaw. So it's like, the tide was certainly turning. We were starting to see some real rough stuff coming at you.
But this is like, what if Sally never made it past the dinner table? I mean, she
Right.
at least got away. She was horribly scarred and all of her friends are dead.
Right.
But in this one, like the evil is just going to go on until someone outside the family stops it. The one person who understood and could have made a difference is now dead.
Well, what's funny is, I mean, like even Dorothy and Debbie like say flat out, we have to finish, we have to close all the loose ends. We have to kill Jackie. And it's like, I wonder if maybe that's how Edmund gets the smack across the face that he's exhibiting at the end.
Because he realizes that they're never going to stop.
Yeah, because he dared say, well, maybe we don't have to kill her. And they went, smack, go to your room.
Right. And just the idea of like, if they really wanted to do that, they could have just, slit her throat as she walked through the door or whatever. But you can tell they take some excitement, like, oh, I've missed this. I've been locked up too long, and I'm sure spreading the family business with my daughter.
Yeah.
This is a bonding exercise. They're so cheerful in it that it's ghastly.
Well,
Ugh.
and our actress Deborah Fairfax, who plays Jackie, I just think she's really just a lovely, appealing presence. She never did much beyond this, nor did Kim Butcher, for that matter. I was looking up to see if anything of note that they had done, and this seems to be kind of the high point of their careers.
That's a damn shame
I
because
agree.
we've talked about a number of movies where I watch and see these great leads, men, women, kids, whatever. I think, oh, these are people I'd like to follow, and sometimes there's nothing more to follow after this.
Right.
I with the with my gosh, Jackie.
Mhm.
What was the actress's name? I'm
Deborah,
terrible at
Deborah,
this.
Deborah Fairfax.
Deborah Fairfax. I kept thinking that she looked almost exactly like Felicity Jones. She was the
Oh,
modern
sure.
actress who was in Star Wars Rogue One and The Theory of Everything. And then Graham looked like a cross between Nathan Fielder and Andrew Garfield. I don't know if that means anything to you, but look them up after the show and you'll see.
I don't know Nathan Fielder, but I could see the Andrew Garfield.
Look up Nathan Fielder and then imagine those two like superimposed like their love child. But yeah, so I guess anything we haven't covered that you want to talk about or any kind of final thoughts on Frightmare?
Uh, the part, I'd say the thing that's always been scariest to me is Debbie. Like she's more terrifying to me than an old lady with a drill, because she's so purely like a thrill kill kind of thing, where she gets off on the violence, and she's smart enough to get away with it by saying, who, me? I'm just a kid. I would never do anything like that. Like she's terrifying to me, and I find her just really kind of off-putting at how nasty she is, and entitled, and obnoxious, pushing it back against her sister, her caretaker. There's all sorts of things that just make me not like her, and she wins at the end. That's what's really kind of unnerving.
Here's the thing. I'm writing a fan fiction alternate timeline of the movies. This is the prequel or a prequel story in the Clockwork Orange universe,
Hmm.
because that took place in the future of like youth run amok. I think that Debbie and Dorothy eventually get captured and all of their horrors are revealed, and Debbie's interviews are splashed across Psychology Today and all this stuff about, the troubled youth and what are we going to do about it? And they decide, well, we're going to develop the Ludovico technique, inspired by Debbie and eventually Alex. Yeah, this is I hate to call it a really special movie, but it really is. It's got a place in my heart, and I can't wait to watch it again. Uh, although I do gotta say, what's wrong with me?
You do got to
Um,
say.
One of the other disturbing murders in this film, it's not just that these people who are somewhat innocent, like the barman, even the boyfriend, even though he's kind of like a
Yeah.
reprobate, he doesn't deserve what he gets,
Right.
which is this vicious multiple stabbings through the eye and the face with a dual-headed pitchfork,
Yeah.
courtesy of Dorothy. And you see him begging, and he's just like helpless and confused because, much like Debbie at the very end of the picture calling out for her father, he's like, Why isn't my girlfriend helping me? Who is this strange woman who's attacking me? And why are you
Right.
standing there laughing?"
Yeah. Well, and that's just it. Like she's getting off on it. Like she has no moral code at all. Like she has no attention. Like Alex was just a mean to an end,
Yeah.
somebody who could ride her around.
Indeed. Well, AC, thanks for taking this ride with me beyond Hammerland. We're coming back next month to close out 2023. I can't believe it, with Witchfinder General. Now, um, I feel like Frightmare is kind of the high point of 2023 for me with this series, or at least one
Sure.
of them. Am I going to go higher next month, or is it because I feel like
Well,
anything after this can only be disappointing?
I was just going to say, I mean, I haven't batted, I don't have a perfect batting average with this year's lineup. Because there have been some that you're kind of like, yay, and there's some kind of like, this is not for me. So I don't know. I don't know where Witchfinder General is going to land for you. I'm really happy that you liked Frightmare, because that was one that I was kind of on the fence. I'm like, I don't know, maybe I want to program some Pete Walker. But again, not knowing how it would land. But I watched it this morning. I'm like, I would like to think Ian enjoys this more than Blood on Satan's Claw. So fingers crossed for Witchfinder General. We will begin we'll end as we began, with Vincent Price in the lead role, but playing a very atypical Price performance. So I think you'll enjoy
Ooh.
it.
I'm excited. Well, thank you very much again for this journey beyond Hammerland with Frightmare. And yeah, folks, please check out AC's stuff at Horror 101 with Dr. AC on his website and also on YouTube. And yeah, like and subscribe and all that good stuff. And like and subscribe to the Kicking the Seat YouTube channel if you like what we do here. And join us back here next month as two things. We got to finish up our journey beyond Hammerland and then figure out where we're going next year.
Exactly. Got to get out the Atlas.
Yeah, how many directions can we go? We've returned, we've gone beyond beneath Hammerland. There you go.
Beneath the Valley of Hammerland.
All right, man. Thank you very much. Take care, and I'll catch you later.
Catch you later. Bye.